There was just nothing to explain it, nothing. It was just very, very scary.
You are about to see real people.
This is not normal.
Reliving horrifying paranormal encounters for the first time.
Oh, I felt terror.
When ghosts attack the living.
He wanted her, and he was gonna get her.
I buried this for nearly 30 years.
Be prepared to be afraid.
Story number 21, take one.
Al Kelchner dreamed of living a quiet life in the countryside. And in 2001, he needed some peace more than ever.
I went through a difficult period in 2001, including my father's death, 9/11, and then I was laid off from the company that I was working for. I'd reached a point in my life where I needed a change. I needed some calm in my life. My dad was a farm boy, so being out in the country, especially someone who was from the urban New York metropolitan area, that was a big thrill.
So Al made a change. He left New York City and bought a hobby farm in Illinois.
It was kind of, I don't know, magical. It just fulfilled every expectation I had about the type of little farm I wanted. It was picture, postcard perfect. I just saw potential and possibilities.
Al was so taken with the farm that he bought it on impulse, without having stepped foot inside. It would be a decision he'd live to regret.
It was very dark, physically, literally physically dark. Oh, it was threatening. It just, you felt uneasy the second you walked into that house. You felt as though you were being watched. It was a very negative, dark energy and extremely intimidating. I did subsequent research and found out that it was a pretty interesting place. There's a lot of history from from the Revolution and colonial days. I was very conflicted. I found my little dream farm, but at the same time, I hated going home at night. The drive, the closer I got, the more unnerved I became because I knew I had to open that back door and walk into a totally dark house out in the country by myself.
Al's uneasy feeling in the house remained just a feeling, until a few days after he moved in.
One morning I got up and I went into the bathroom to shower and get ready for work. And the bathroom was a mess. Towels were on the floor. Toiletries were scattered around. Items had been taken out of the cabinet and they were laying across the top of the vanity. I was uneasy. I had no logical explanation.
Little did Al know, this was just the beginning. Soon he began to experience other strange phenomena.
There was walking, talking, and frequently my face was touched and stroked. It was one of those experiences you can't see, you can't explain, and it's really unnerving. But that wasn't the end of it. I was sitting in the family room and talking with a friend on the phone when I heard, suddenly, loud knocking by the front door in the living room. which was a room and a half away. And then moved into the parlor, which is adjacent to the living room. And upstairs, directly over my head. Probably lasted a couple of minutes and was incredibly unnerving. And that was when I finally threw in the towel, raised the white flag and said, okay, I believe in you. So we're gonna have to coexist.
If Al thought acknowledging whatever was haunting his house would calm the activity, he was wrong.
I was in the corner of the kitchen. I had bread in the toaster. And as I stood there, all of a sudden I felt a sharp pain in the back of my neck. I thought, well, maybe I'd slept the wrong way and pinched a nerve. But the pain spread through my shoulders, down into my chest. And I thought, oh my God, I just bought this place. I'm gonna have a heart attack in my new residence and nobody's gonna find me. You know, this is just awful. But then I realized that it wasn't from stress. It was someone who had wrapped their arms around me and was squeezing tighter and tighter. And I said, stop it. And immediately it stopped and dissipated. But that wasn't the end of it. On Thursday of the same week, at about the same time, same location, same routine, toast in the toaster, it happened again. This time, though, just was an immediate bear hug. Someone very large, very strong, very powerful, wrapping their arms around me and pulling me close. And again, I yelled, stop it, and it stopped immediately. I felt terrified. I couldn't see anything, but obviously there was something that had a physical effect on me. So I had no answers.
A house could feel physically threatening depending on what entity or spirit is occupying the house. Spirits are what they were in life. So if you're a violent person in life, if you're an angry person in life, you probably carry that to the other side. Spirits can get violent if they just don't want you around. They could want to chase you out.
It was a test. Let's see if you're going to stay around.
But Al did stay around.
I went upstairs. So I turned into the northwest bedroom, and I opened the door. The minute I stepped foot in that room, I felt nauseous. I felt terror. And I felt as though something was pulling me down to the floor. The terror was almost debilitating. I was pushed a couple times. I was struck, and all of a sudden I felt a sharp pain in my right ribs. And that lasted for probably 3 weeks before it finally dissipated.
Al started to realize that his life was in danger.
I had a fight or flight instinct, and the instinct was to flee, so I did. It's really terrifying, the sense that you're not alone, and that something bad could happen.
After experiencing a string of strange events in his picture-perfect farmhouse, Al Kelchner was under attack.
The feeling of dread and doom was overbearing.
Al decided he needed outside help.
I decided to open up the house to investigative teams. It really started with wanting a confirmation that what was happening to me, one, was really happening, and number two, I wasn't losing my mind.
I'm pretty sensitive to the spirits, so when I get to a location, I can kind of sense there was a lot of animosity going on at this place. Before I go to any location, I would always try to do some research on it. I read a lot about the people that owned the farm initially. There was a doctor as well that lived at the property, and from what I understand, he did some crazy things with the children. He would molest them.
Did you hear that?
Within a few hours, we heard screams by doing some EVP sessions. The things that were scary to me were there were a lot of black shadows at the property. I heard noises coming from the staircase that was behind me. I heard somebody running down the stairs. I felt something come up close to my back, and the next thing I know, I felt just like a bear hug completely around my stomach.
This would not be the only investigation at Al's farm.
As time went on and I had groups come in, members of these investigating teams seemed to observe more and more shadow figures. One of the most amazing experiences I've had at that house was an evening when a small group was there.
Oh my God, look! Look!
One of the people sitting at the dining room table said, "Oh my God, there's a shadow walking back and forth in the living room." And sure enough, the window was completely blacked out. They observed them outside through the windows, walking between the barn, the machine shed, and inside the house. And then that morphed into what looked like the figure of a person. And for the next half hour, we watched that shadow walk around in the living room. It was pretty profound.
Seeing a shadow figure, if it's a shadow man, you are seeing a spirit trying to manifest itself. It's trying to show itself to you. So it forms as a dark mass. Shadow people, on the other hand, they were never human. They're a bit more physical, larger shadows with heads, no necks, big shoulders. It could be you are going through a weakness at the time, and they're taking advantage of it. You could be also dabbling in something you're not supposed to be dabbling in, and they come as a warning.
Shadow people can be pretty bad and could hurt people. I was scared, frightened for Al's safety.
I was told there could be up to 30 spirits in the house at one time, which I thought was an exaggeration. But when I hear that multiple times repeated to me over a period of years, then I start to pay attention. I knew the place was haunted, but I didn't realize how haunted it really was. There was a woman at the house who came to visit, and she described every entity, known entity in the house. There was a farmer from the 19th century who was in the kitchen. There was a male entity in the northwest bedroom of the house. The report was that this entity was a doctor who had a lot of negative energy or was not very nice. There came a point where I needed answers and I needed resolution. I believe it was 2011, to do something about the energy at the house. And no one had ever done a cleansing before.
Cleanse this house of all negativity. Only love and light may enter.
So we went from room to room, saged the corners high and low. It was my responsibility to make positive statements and also ban any negative energy. What I didn't know, although I was told afterwards, is that the medium with me could hear growling, furniture being slammed.
Negativity. Only love and light may enter. Cleanse this house of all negativity. Only love and light may enter.
And apparently it worked, because as I look back on that period and prior, the energy was very dark at the house. It isn't anymore.
The cleansing seemed to rid the house of its ghosts, but Al wasn't done with the spirit world yet. There was one final ghost, and it was waiting especially for him.
A woman in the house, who was usually found on the second floor, died around 1845. And the connection was described to me as something like a soulmate. She described Sarah as my wife from a past life. And it's really difficult for me to wrap my brain around, but they recorded an EVP. It's very brief, it's rapid, but it's pretty clear. It's a female voice saying, "I love him."
I love him.
It's hard for me to comprehend. I really thought about selling the house and giving up my dream. But I decided to stick with it and see what would unfold. Although I know there's some very negative energy, my experience for the most part has been positive, and somehow I managed to cope with what was going on around me and achieve some level of acceptance. And here I am 8 years later.
When ghosts physically attack the living, victims typically feel themselves being squeezed or hugged. But sometimes, the attacks can be even more violent and leave scars that never heal.
That's Tormentor, story number 6.
I was in my 20s, and I was in bed. We were sleeping, and all of a sudden I felt real heavy in the chest. And I woke my husband up and I said, "Get it off my chest. I can't breathe."
Honey, what's going on?
And he said, "There's nothing there." And I said, "There is, I can't breathe."
Okay.
It lasted about 10 minutes. I felt like I was being choked.
Something was attacking me.
I was scared, you know. Nothing like that had ever happened before. And the next day, I had bruises on my neck. They were like finger marks.
Karen didn't know what to make of the incident, but it left her with an uneasy feeling.
Next day, I got flowers. It was like for a funeral.
A few days later, with her husband away for work, Karen had her next strange encounter.
I saw a man in a blue shirt. I didn't recognize him at all. I didn't see his face clear. I always saw him at the bottom of the bed. I was being watched. I told him to stop, to go away. You're not welcome here, go away. But he didn't. I couldn't count the number of times that I saw him.
But one night, the apparition did more than just watch.
I just felt myself being pulled down, and then he would assault me.
Karen White had been attacked in her bed by a spirit.
And it was every night. He would assault me in some way or another, and then he raped me. It got to the point where I was afraid to go to bed at night.
I have in fact heard of spirits sexually assaulting or having sex with the living. I had 2 cases personally where that happened. One of those cases went on for almost 20 years.
Eventually, the attack subsided, giving Karen some relief.
I wasn't being attacked so much, but it took quite a while before it stopped there.
In the following years, Karen and her husband had a son, Ed. With the nighttime attacks having all but stopped, Karen thought her torment was over. But the worst was yet to come.
I didn't know it would affect them. I thought it was just me.
The first sign of trouble came when the couple tried to have their baby christened. Now an adult, Ed feels it was no coincidence.
The night before I was supposed to be baptized, the church had burnt down, so I didn't go the next morning, of course.
From his earliest memories, Ed recalls being tormented by evil spirits.
From age 3 and up, it's a piece of cake remembering almost everything, especially all the horrible stuff. I call him the tormentor. Always come out of the closet, try to scare the hell out of me, come out from underneath the bed or in front of the bed. Or he'd come from a dark corner, got a long face, spiked kind of tongue, horns on top of the head, black shiny skin. That's the tormentor. If he didn't come out, it would be spiders. And it would be the walls, the ceiling, the floors, the bed, everything covered in spiders. And even if I tried to scream, it felt like spiders were coming out of my mouth. So it was a total nightmare city. Mom tried to blame it off as it's my imagination, trying to calm me down, not to freak me out. I knew it was something different.
I wasn't too shocked because, you know, I thought he was having something like I was having. I told him not to worry about it.
I barely didn't get much sleep when I was a kid, and my parents did what most parents do, is they took me in and had me checked out, and none of that made a difference, but I just had to kind of play along so they wouldn't think I'm crazy or I wouldn't get locked up in a loony bin.
The family was desperate to move out, but finances were a problem. Eventually, they saved enough to get a new home. But whatever was tormenting them had no intention of letting them go so easily.
This thing followed us there as well. It got worse in the teenage years. Writing appeared on the wall, just telling me to kill other people, kill myself, ways of killing myself. I just had to keep putting all that stuff out of my memory.
I felt bad for him. I just told him it was okay. You know, nothing bad is gonna happen to you.
The torment continued for 10 more years, until finally, Karen and Ed sought outside help.
We have a friend who belongs to a paranormal group. It was through him that we got this shaman.
They had us basically sit in a chair like this. They put a piece of cloth underneath the chair, and then he used like a sea salt and an eagle's feather, and they just brush down your body. They fold up the doll into like a little totem and just say that you give all your evil spirits and energy to this doll. And then they're supposed to go and burn it. They call it the release place. The doll burns completely, you're out of trouble. And sure enough, the next day they went to the burn site. My doll didn't burn completely.
After a few months' respite, the torment and the man returned.
He disappeared for quite a while. I thought it was finished, it was over with. But there he was. He's back.
All right, come on!
Fearing for his mother's safety, Ed took matters into his own hands.
Come and get me! Come on!
I challenged it and told it that you want to attack somebody, leave Mom alone, because Mom's in her 70s. So I said, leave Mom alone. Bring it on. I'm open for it. If you want to attack somebody, you can come and attack me.
To protect his mother from the evil spirits that had tormented her for years, Ed White challenged them to come after him.
Bring it on. I'm open for it. If you want to attack somebody, you can come and attack me.
It was an ultimatum he'd live to regret.
He was being attacked, scratched.
My back is covered. My ribs, my stomach, my chest. They take months, sometimes years to heal up. We had a nurse practitioner. She measured my arms and the scratches, and she said there's no way you could have made those scratches yourself on your back. The body ain't meant to bend that way, so there's no way it could have been you. It's always in threes every time it happens. The pain is unbelievable that goes with it. You can't scream, you can't do nothing.
The theory is when you get 3 scratches, because they usually come in threes, that it is the entity's way of mocking the Trinity. It's a matter of making you afraid and keeping you afraid so you don't have the will to fight back.
I can be in bed, I could be in Mom's room, I could be anywhere.
I've known Edwin and Karen for about 5 years. He's a kind, gentle soul, and we see him all the time. He was in my yard, and he dropped right to his knees.
We were talking away, and then they saw my leg get red. They saw the scratches come, and then they just saw the blood just start gushing down the one leg.
He had 3 fresh scratches on his leg, deep red scratches. I go, what was that? And he goes, it got me again. And I go, what do you mean? And he's like, they're after me again, these demons. It was really weird. You'd have to see it to believe it.
And the pizza man saw it too.
He saw the skin rip open, 3 on each side, and he's just like, okay, let me get out of here, please.
To this day, Ed is still being attacked by his tormentor.
Some people think you're crazy, you know, sometimes. I worry about Ed because he just can't take it anymore.
The most frightening thing for me is the scratches on the body, and if they're gonna get worse, or if it's gonna even be taken to another level. Whatever has been following me around, there's gonna be no end to this.
Ed and Karen are currently searching for someone who can rid Ed of his tormentor once and for all. Not all ghost attacks result in physical assaults. Some of the most terrifying can be when evil spirits try to take away our most precious things. Our children.
Story number 3 featuring Kristen, take 1.
We were renting a townhouse and it was just a lot higher rent, so we moved into this house, which was a little cheaper. We had a yard and just had all of the amenities that we wanted.
After Kristen and her husband Ken moved in with their 6-year-old daughter Becca, tragedy struck.
My aunt committed suicide. She hung herself in her basement of her home. We're very close. Very close. I think she just had a lot of mental things going on.
At the funeral, Kristen said goodbye to a much-loved aunt forever. Or so she thought.
Just, you're a wreck after those things, you know? We got home, I was grieving, and I was mad at her. I was severely mad. I hated her. And I remember just yelling at her.
Why did you do this? Why?
Just yelling and screaming at her because she was putting our entire family through something we should never have to go through. I told her she was weak. I told her that I was ashamed of her. Of course, I'm screaming at this point at her. Told her that I hated her and that I would never forgive her. I'm sorry.
But Kristen had no idea that by venting her anger and grief, she might have opened a pathway to the spirit world.
Spirits and demons can appear more often in times of grief. When people are grieving, it sometimes opens doors for other things to come in and prey on the vulnerable.
I was grieving severely. I was angry. I was hateful.
Why?
So, yeah, I believe that quite possibly that I could have let something in at that point. I remember one night, it was probably about 11:30, and I was flipping over laundry. And I felt something behind me. And I turned and looked, and there she was.
Overcome with grief after the tragic death of her aunt, Kristen Whitesell had unwittingly invited something unexpected into her home.
And I turned and looked, and there she was. I took off running up the stairs screaming, and I turned around, and my aunt was coming up the steps after me. She looked completely different, demonic. You don't ever get that sight out of your head. And at first I thought I was going crazy. Like I thought you're wanting to see her so badly because I didn't get to say goodbye. When it first begins to happen, you kind of feel like you're imagining all of this. This isn't real, this isn't happening. And you just kind of go on. Second time, you're kind of like, oh God. I would see her daily in different locations of the home.
Soon, other strange activity started to happen around the house.
My husband was working nights, and we were sitting in the living room, and we heard bumping going on upstairs. I went upstairs, and my bedroom door was open. I heard a big boom, and my bedroom door was closed. There was no drafts, there was no windows open or anything. I always felt like we were being watched. At nighttime, you would hear noises downstairs in the basements, like clanging. Go downstairs, and off in the corner, you would see a shadow in the corner. Looked as though a man that was hunched over who was hovering, and his back was turned to you. He scared me. He scared the crap out of me because he would never show me his face, and he just stood there lurking. You don't know what they're capable of. You don't know if by interacting with them, if that's gonna put your family at danger, put them at risk. I felt like I was going crazy.
Until now, the activity had been limited to manifestations. But that was about to change.
When it happened the first time, I would remember waking up in the middle of the night. I would feel as though I was being choked. And I just felt like there was something that had its hands around my neck and was holding me down, and I couldn't yell out. I remember screaming in my dream, and I remember yelling for my husband. But in all actuality, I wasn't. He never heard me at all. It became a nightly thing.
Spirits can physically attack an individual. If you're dealing with a more malevolent entity, the idea is to torment you, to make you weak, and to keep you that way. Malevolent energies want to be in control.
And Kristen wasn't the only one in danger.
The kids would tell us that they hear things and that they saw things and that they felt things.
Searching for answers, the couple discovered that the house was an old railway house that had a secret past.
The house was built, it was a slave home. And the upstairs was the master's quarters. Off of the side walls, there were little rooms, and they were cubby holes where the slaves would go and hide when the masters were entertaining guests. Well, you still had access from Rebecca's room into one of what was the slaves' quarters. Rebecca would say that a man on fire would come out of that cubby hole that used to be the slave quarters. At first, she kind of made it sound like it was a dream. Mom, there's a man in my room. It started off, he was only coming maybe once a month. And then it became 2 to 3 times a week. And then it became a nightly thing that he was coming to her. He would encourage her to go with him. He wanted her. And he was gonna get her.
An apparition of a burning man was threatening to take Kristen Whitesell's daughter away with him.
He wanted her, and he was gonna get her. It scared her pretty badly. Immediately, as a mother, you're going into protection mode. Is he trying to take her soul? What's he trying to do? And all I could think is, you're not taking mine. It's not happening. She's mine. And I told her, you tell him no, that you're not going anywhere. You stay right here. I can't protect you if you're gone. There's no greater fear than the fear that your child is not safe in their own home.
Fearing for her family's safety, Kristen calls in paranormal investigators.
A lot of times, spirits can be attracted to loss or mourning. Demons can come around because they follow someone. A lot of negative energy can happen. To get started, we took in our EVP recorders, our K2 meters, and our DVR system at the time.
My husband and Jeremy were downstairs in the basement.
We had motion detectors on every floor, and from there, we just began asking questions. Who are you? What is your name? Why are you here?
Did you hear that?
All of a sudden, this real deep, nasty, maniacal man came over our EVP recorders just laughing at us. It was very overwhelming and kind of frightening.
Voices on the EVPs, they were mocking my husband.
Jeremy, you there? Something's moving upstairs.
Our motion detectors would go off, and we'd go up to see what was causing it. And as soon as we went upstairs, the motion detector downstairs in the basement would go off. Almost like it was playing games with us.
Come in, Jeremy.
And all of a sudden, we just see a shadow just go from the front door into where we are.
Did you hear that?
Really fast.
And you can edit this out. I remember him saying his exact words, "Oh, they did not stay in that basement very long." I don't think that their feet touched the stairs. He had to be scared, quite honestly. He had to be. Who wouldn't?
This investigation and client, to me, is one of the most active places I've been to. A part of me believes that it's just negative spirits from the railroad days, but another part of me believes that it could be demonic.
With the paranormal activity getting more intense, Kristen and Ken decided to get the house cleansed.
When we conducted the cleansing, we had 2 Wiccans with us, and they conducted the blessing, and they went into every crack and cranny of that house with salt and oils. according to them, they were able to kick out the real maniacal spirits.
Although the house was cleansed, the family couldn't live with the memories of what they went through and decided to move.
You can't force a child to feel safe again. It definitely was the scariest period of my life. You're not in control. It was time to cut our ties and go. My aunt had passed away, and normally that's who I would go to talk to, but she wasn't there. It's hard to recover from something like that. I'm never gonna go back there. I haven't been back, and I don't plan on ever going back.
There was just nothing to explain it, nothing. It was just very, very scary.
You are about to see real people.
This is not normal.
Reliving horrifying paranormal encounters for the first time.
We just sat there with our jaws dropped. We couldn't believe what we were seeing.
When spirits are intent on doing evil.
The basement is super old and creepy.
I buried this for nearly 30 years.
Be prepared to be afraid.
Story number 14, featuring Mandy. Take one.
My name is Mandy Lynn, and I am co-owner of Liberty Tattoo in Libertyville and here in Antioch. We took over the building in May of 2007. When we first saw the space, we'd realized the capstone on the outside said it was built in 1904. There's a lot of history in the building.
When Mandy and Eric took over the space from a previous business, they didn't know renovations would stir up something terrifying.
We would close at the end of the night. We'd get in the next day and there's paintbrushes missing or rollers missing or... The art that we bought came with glass in them, so we decided to put them behind the counters and bolted them to the wall with the wiring to the frame, secured them to the wall. The first plate glass picture had fallen off the wall and was down on the ground, and the glass was busted everywhere.
We just chalked it up as not being hung properly. The next day when the second one was down, we knew that something else was going on.
And then it was the last picture that had glass in it, had come down and was broken.
We put it up right. There's no reason why it should have just fallen off the wall.
If they hoped that would be the end of the strangeness, they were wrong.
When we opened for business, and the first thing that we noticed is that there were large male bare footprints on top of our display cases that are 3.5 feet off of the ground.
I was trying to rack my brain who would have been walking around barefoot on the floor, which would have been more reasonable than on top of the counter.
Mandy and Eric's employees were also affected.
The boy employees just were terrified to come into the basement. We have supplies down here that I'd have to send them downstairs in the basement to get, and they would fight over, no, you go, no, you go, I'm not going into the basement.
The basement is super old and creepy. There's a certain area where the concrete is dirt, and it was either dug up or never filled in. And we found that to be very unusual and wondered what's buried there.
The first time I saw the hole in the floor, I just was trying to figure out why you would pour concrete everywhere else in this basement except for that one space, and what was particularly special about that one spot.
Mandy and Eric discovered that they weren't the first people to encounter paranormal activity on the property.
Actually, one of my neighbors used to work in the space. She came in and we had metal ladders leaned up against the front door to the basement. And she said, "You need to be careful because there's plate glass in that door." And I said, "No, it's just wood, it's just painted." And she said, "No, we painted over the glass because Lloyd used to stare through the window, standing on the stairs and peer through that window, and that was directly behind the counter where all the employees sat." So she said, "We just painted the windows because it was freaking us out looking over there and seeing him standing there." It made me a little creeped out knowing that he was here. To me, it was very obvious that he likes women quite a bit. Even with myself, he would stand behind me and breathe. Even with me sitting in my chair, you could just feel him behind me. But there were multiple times where customers, female customers, would be across the room looking through the tattoo flash racks, and there's no one behind them, and you could watch them go. You know, and I'd say, "Are you okay?" And they're like, "Was there someone just standing behind me?" And I'm like, "No." The racks would just open one leaf at a time, very, very slowly, all by themselves, until a particular sheet of flash was shown which had a bunch of angels on them.
Usually it was a female client would turn around in a panic and look at us, and we'd smile and wave and nod, and yeah, I see it too. After a while, it got to be a little bit much, so we put in cameras. One day, our employees called us and said, "What the hell happened here last night?" And he said, "There's a sign ripped off the wall, one of the pictures is down off the wall, and the plant, which is a very large plant and a very large planter, was tipped completely over." And my husband and I reviewed the security tapes. At about 9:30 in the morning, all at the same time, the sign to the handicap bathroom fell off the wall, ripping off the drywall sheeting with it. Fell off the wall. The picture dropped off of the wall, and the planter just tipped over. There was no one in the studio. Like, our studio was not even open yet. The alarm was still set.
The spirit may destroy somebody's belongings or hide them. Mostly it's to get their attention, to let them know they're there. Or if they want something and you're not paying attention to them, they're going to get your attention one way or another.
Soon, Mandy would start seeing ghosts.
There is a little girl in here, a little girl spirit. The first couple times I saw her, she was just very playful. She would hide between the couches. She would play all over the studio.
I always have been a believer of paranormal. I've experienced too many things, seen too many things, felt too many things for me to say nothing else is going on.
But the little girl wasn't the only spirit. And the others weren't harmless like her.
One day I was taking a nap.
Mandy Lynn's new tattoo parlor was full of unexplained activity. Strange presences, ghosts, and falling objects. But no one had been physically attacked. Yet.
And as I was sleeping, I could feel that I was being pulled by my feet down across the couch. And when I opened my eyes, I realized that there was no one there. There was just no one there, but I could feel myself being pulled down the couch, and that's when I freaked out, and my husband came flying into the room, and he's like, what the hell is wrong? And I'm like, that thing just drugged me down the couch. And he's like, are you okay? And I said, yes. Are you hurt? No. But a little freaked out that the thing can actually move me.
The attack prompted Mandy and Eric to bring in paranormal investigator Bob Jensen.
So we came in here looking to see if we had any real high EMFs. We also used the audio recorders, digital recorders, to see what kind of audio we would be able to pick up down here. With different pictures that we took, most of them came up on the full color spectrum camera, that we had anomalies that would pop up. We had a couple that showed up near a floodlight. There was actually a figure standing there. The pictures themselves were captured at the far end of the basement.
Seeing the sheer size of Lloyd was very unnerving. I very much get the feeling that he's a sexual predator, and then to see him in that form made me very, very uncomfortable.
It definitely has a male physique to it, and there was a series of photographs. It looks like he's standing, and then the next picture looks like he's going into a crouching position. A couple more photos, it looks like he was sitting on almost like a crate or a box.
It's creepy as hell. I mean, this was like a more primal form, just a male shape, but very large, very powerful shape.
There was also audio evidence of paranormal activity.
On the audio recordings, one was a little girl's voice. The little girl's voice was warning us. She said, be careful, he's coming. You know, be careful, he's coming. She kept saying, be careful.
Bob decided to research the history of the building in an attempt to find some background on the entities.
There were claims that there might have been different crimes that were committed at this particular property. But the crimes against women that might be tied in with this particular location definitely goes back to the 19-teens and maybe up until the 1930s or 1940s.
For sure, finding out the history and that there was possible rape and killing down here made a lot of sense, because there's one particular spot in the basement that it's very hard for women to be near without feeling very uncomfortable. And when you ask every single one of them kind of what are you feeling, they feel like victimized sexually.
With this building, a lot of these fieldstone, there's also limestone and quartz. And limestone and quartz have been reported to actually hold on to residual hauntings. This is definitely a good catalyst for holding on to and retaining a lot of information that's happened over numerous decades.
With minerals such as quartz and limestone, things like that, I'm not sure if it's an attraction for spirits, but they can use the energies from those things. It can also trap energy as well. So if a foundation is built upon these things, it could fuel more paranormal activity.
Terrified of what Lloyd might do next, Mandy decided to take action.
After the investigation, we asked a couple of our friends who are spiritual healers and work with energy to come into the space and help us try and clear out the energy that was here. We had a couple people come in that used sage sticks and smudge sticks and just asked the entities that if there was something that they needed or if there was some help that we could give them to move to another place.
The cleansing worked.
I don't think the little girl was here any longer at all. I think Lloyd hung out a little longer. It took him a little longer to move on. I find it very important that we had the space cleansed and the spirits cleared, because I don't know if I would have been comfortable staying or any of the other employees would have been comfortable staying much longer.
They will never know what evil acts Lloyd committed in his earthly life. But not all spirits are like that. Some can turn evil if they think the living are encroaching on their territory.
Story number 18, featuring Tammy, take 1.
We bought the house in 2003. The feeling we got when we went in, it was just a positive feeling in the beginning. We just kind of knew that that was the place to be.
All right, let's get to work.
It was a small community. We knew we were going to try and have a child.
Tammy's positive feelings about the house did not last long.
Probably about a week after we moved in, and my husband was alone in the house for the first time. He said that he heard a banging on the wall coming closer and closer.
Hello?
Tammy Northcutt and her husband Jerry had recently moved into a new home. Within the first week, they were hearing strange noises.
He said that he heard a banging on the wall coming closer. There was nothing there.
Next, it was Tammy's turn to start hearing things.
In the middle of the night, I got up because I heard arguing, and I didn't know where it was coming from. But we've got a vent that's in our living room, a heater vent. And you could tell that it was coming up from there. We would go down in the basement to find out what was going on. We could never see anything. It was just constantly just there, you know, but there was nothing you couldn't see anything, but you could hear it. When we were in the bedroom, we would hear violin music whenever the heater would kick on. It was beautiful classical music, but we just never knew where it was coming from. At first, we were really afraid of, you know, what is going on, because we didn't know what was going on, what was happening.
The objective for spirits making themselves known could be a number of things. It could be they have a message they want to pass on. Others don't know they're passed on, so they're trying to interact. They're trying to be a part of the living world.
Unsure of where to turn, the couple suffered in silence until help came from an unlikely source.
There was a shop, downtown Janesville. We met the couple. We were talking about the house, and they overheard us talking. And they said, we can help. They said that they could come bless the house. They blessed the house, and the things stopped for a while.
The house seemed finally to be at peace. 18 months later, Tammy and Jerry had their first child, Connor.
As soon as my son was born, it started up again, the knocking. The cabinet doors in the kitchen, you can hear open and close. And, well, the basement door started opening and closing. My son's door was opening and closing. It started to kick up again.
The mysterious events in the house continued until after Connor's second birthday. Then, they became more and more sinister.
Connor started seeing something on his bed that he referred to as Mr. Raider. He would tell me that I needed to get Mr. Raider off the bed. I would look, I could not see anything, but I knew he wasn't making it up. You could just tell just how scared he was.
Soon, Connor began to experience another unwelcome guest. An old woman would appear and shake his bed at 2 a.m.
That's when he would come running to our room about 2 a.m. It got to the point where he just refused to go into the room. Not being able to do anything about it because I could not see what he was seeing. I could only listen and I could only comfort, but I couldn't fix it for him. So that was really upsetting for me.
Spirits can be drawn to young children. Young children don't have the same blocks as adults. They're more creative. They're more open to what's going on around them. They don't have so many hang-ups and so many blocks. So it's easier for a spirit to communicate with a child because the child will just take it at face value and interact.
My husband's mother had passed away before Connor was born, but we do have a picture of her, and he kept on looking at her picture, and he asked me to tell her to stop waking him up in the middle of the night.
However, Tammy was powerless when events took a worrying new turn.
I heard the door close, and Connor was in the room.
Connor?
And I was frantic.
Connor? Hey!
I didn't know what to do. I couldn't get the door open, and my son was in there, and I had to get to him. And I was actually going to call the fire department to have them come remove the door. I was so scared. And the door clicked, and I reached and I turned the knob, and it opened, and I was able to get him out. After that, we took the handle off the door so it could no longer latch.
Frustrated and unable to explain the strange events in their home, Tammy and her husband reached out for help a second time.
I've been investigating since the 90s, about 1997. They were scared. They really were. Our first investigation there probably produced the most evidence out of any single one investigation we've ever done anywhere. Throughout the night, we had what we call Class C EVPs, electronic voice phenomenon. But there were some times that we got what we call Class A EVPs, where we could hear exactly what it was saying.
Stop saying that. Get out.
get out, come get us, stop saying that. We had something we thought growled at us. And all of a sudden, we hear, our first impression was that we were dealing with something very negative. This thing is saying, I'm the boss here.
A few days later, the entity took things to the next level.
I felt somebody choke me. There was pressure on my neck.
Tammy Northcutt and her husband had started to investigate the strange events in their home. Their son Connor was being traumatized. And now, things were about to escalate further.
I felt somebody choke me. There was pressure on my neck, and it felt like there was hands around my neck, like I was being strangled.
Baby, hey!
And it was almost like I was being pushed into the bed, but, and then I felt like a release and I was able to sit up. But it was awful. It was an awful feeling. And that frightened me. I was ready to pack up and just leave right then and there.
Tammy asked the paranormal group to come back. This time they brought Paul, their most gifted psychic.
He came over and he was getting messages already from before he even got to our house. He drew a picture of our house. It was amazing that he drew it before he even got to our house. It was incredible.
The first thing Paul picked up on was that the house had once been a seedy drinking den.
He's talking about this place being, where there's drunk people, and he makes the sound of one guy that just continually goes, "Arr, arr, arr." And I about fell off my stool when he did that, because it sounded just like what we heard. And I was floored. He also said there's another guy that likes to play tricks, and he's hitting the wall, or the ceiling, causing knocking. And we had rhythmic knocking in our evidence. And Paul couldn't have known any of that. Our biggest question was, who was saying, "Come get us," and who told us to get out?
I was telling him about where Connor was seeing Mr. Rader. I showed him the room. And he told us it wasn't Mr. Rader, it was Mr. Reader. And in the 1930s, there was like a traveler's lodge that sat where our house is now. He said Mr. Reader owned the hotel.
And Paul's theory is that Mr. Reader is hanging out in the master bedroom area. And he's not a very nice guy. And he's probably the one that told us to get out.
It seemed like it was Mr. Reader who was threatening Connor and Tammy.
From what we found out with Paul, Mr. Reader felt that women were second-class citizens, basically. I feel it was him trying to get me out of the room. I think he was trying to scare me to get out of the house. And it worked. He started talking to Mr. Reader. As he was explaining to Mr. Reader that this is a different time, women are equal, the light started to brighten up in the room. And it felt lighter in the room. And now I don't have that negative feeling anymore. That's gone.
Paul had cleansed the negative spirit, but still had some questions.
He asked Jerry what the name Dell meant. And he said, well, it's Della. That was my mom. She had passed away. And that's who was following Connor around.
The female spirit who had been waking Connor in the night, Tammy's mother-in-law, wasn't trying to frighten Connor, but instead to protect him. It was her voice that Tammy heard amongst the arguing in the basement.
I actually kind of felt a little comforted knowing that she was looking out for him.
First of all, we tell the people that we work with that they have to take control over their house. So Tammy, for example, would tell whatever was there, this is my house, get out. Well, she's learned now that there's certain spirits she wants to keep there, but you have to take control over your own place.
Every once in a while, you'll still hear the door slamming in the back and the heavy footsteps going down the stairs. But knowing what I know now because of Paul, I do feel better knowing that it's just, basically just the sounds of the men going into the bar, because that's where the basement was the bar. And kind of knowing that I'm not going to get harmed, I'm not going to get hurt, I think makes me feel more comfortable.
One of the more unusual reasons for ghosts harboring evil intentions toward the living is that they died in tragic circumstances, and they want their living victims to suffer the same fate.
Paranormal Survivor 2, Michael's Haunted Apartment, story number 4, take 1.
It was 2005, and a couple friends of mine, longtime friends, bought a building that had had a fire, and they decided to renovate it.
After his friends finished renovating the burned-out building, they offered to rent Michael one of the apartments.
When I moved in, it felt cozy. It was a comfortable little place. I thought something I could live in for a while.
My thought exactly. Look around.
I actually had my stepson who was living with me at the time. My kids would come over on the weekends. So it was a small apartment, but that was it, just him and I.
That feeling of coziness did not last long.
The strangeness in this apartment started about 3 days in. We started hearing the cabinet doors in the kitchen. Like someone was opening them just enough so they'd tap, tap, tap. Check it out, could never find out what was going on. I had an exterminator come, and because I thought maybe there was mice or something, but there wasn't. So I had no explanation for it at that point. It was shortly after that, other things started to happen. The stereo would blast on, at 3:20 in the morning, every single morning, and it would be full blast. I thought maybe my son was goofing around with me and turning it on. But then with everything else that was going on, I started to believe him that he wasn't. It would be so loud that, you know, I'm thinking I'm gonna get kicked out of here.
What's going on? You did this?
My son was about 12 years old at the time. He was scared. He was a little terrified about it. I mean, he doesn't, even to this day, doesn't really talk about it much. The electric would go on and off. It would flicker. And just weird things we'd hear banging on the wall. And just, there was no reason for it. I was the only apartment on that end, so nobody could bang on the walls. So we started to figure out that something strange was going on. There was 3 different times that I would try to look up the history of this building to find out what might have happened. And every time I would type in to start looking, my computer would drop off. Nothing else would die, all the rest of the power stood on, just the computer would go off. It was a brand new computer. I brought it into the service guy 3 different times. He finally yelled at me and told me don't come back, because there was nothing wrong with it.
Something in the building was hampering Michael's attempt to investigate its history. Michael Vero was having strange experiences after moving into a building that had been renovated due to a fire.
At first, I didn't make any connection to the fire at all. I thought our minds were playing with us. So I thought that, you know, we were missing something, that, you know, at some point we were gonna say, ah, that's what it was, and laugh about it. I had rented a movie, and in this movie, in the end, there was extras, and it showed how to do EVPs. So we thought, well, let's try it.
EVP, or electronic voice phenomena, are believed to be a means of recording communications with the spirit world.
One night after recording, and we picked something up.
Nope. Listen in. Here we go.
What we got first was like growling. We'd hear growling on it, like kind of like demonic type growls. And my son at one point said, "Go to the light. Go to the light," you know?
Get away from the light.
You could hear like a man's voice, a demonic type man's voice. I started picking and poking and trying to make them mad. And I said, oh, I'm gonna have a cigarette. I had said, do you want a cigarette? I said, you can't have any, you're dead. And when we played the tape back, this little girl on the tape said, so who cares? And it was as clear as day.
So who cares?
And I'm thinking, a little girl on the other side that don't care? This is dangerous. My hair just stuck up on end. I couldn't believe it. I said, wow, this is real. I invited a woman over to watch a movie, have some dinner with me one night, and I never told her anything because, you know, I wasn't sure exactly what was happening. And a picture of my kids, it came off and it flew across the room and then slammed against the radiator. And we kind of laughed it off and played it off. And I walked her out to her car. And walking her out, I started telling her what's been going on. And, you know, she acted like she was interested, but I think she thought I was crazy. And when I walked back into the apartment, a horseshoe came off the wall that I had screwed into the plastered wall. It came off the wall, and it just skinned my head. I mean, just thrown at me, like somebody was, you know, like somebody was angry and just threw it at me. At this point, I'm not feeling too good about the apartment at all. I'm now worried about my kids' safety. When all the kids were over, I had 4 kids, so there was times when they would be camping out in the living room floor.
And that's where you may come in. If you drive a tank, APC, or other heavy-wheeling vehicle across the tracks and other than prepared crossings, you may be knocking the rails out of agreement. That may be part of the trains. Whatever you do, make sure you take the heavy vehicle over only at preparing crossings.
And there was a few times that they would hear, like, banging on the floor around them. And, you know, I didn't know what to tell them. So we started all sleeping together, camping out on the living room floor together. My stepson walks in the room and he says, "Dad, do you see this?" Because I heard a lot of clicking, but I didn't pay attention to it. I looked up and the mouse on the computer was moving.
Michael Vero and his son had discovered a paranormal entity in his apartment. And it was gaining strength.
I looked up and the mouse on the computer was moving and it was clicking stuff. And we just sat there with our jaws dropped. We couldn't believe what we were seeing.
Was the house finally ready to give up its secrets?
Spirits being made up of energy can manipulate electronics quite easily. A computer is no different. I've done 2 cases where it has happened. I also worked in another case where spirit actually things were actually typed out on the computer.
And sure enough, there was a picture of the newspaper. The building was, you know, burnt up and the fire trucks in front of it. And there was a little story on it. Talked about how the fire started and how the smoke poured through the building and that there was 2 deaths in the building. There was a little girl and her father who lived in my apartment. And when the fire broke out, the little girl hid in my closet. But she hid in there. The father apparently died in the hallway. She died in the closet of the building. At that point, the computer went out again. I felt very uneasy when I read that. It seemed like they were getting more comfortable with us, and they were doing, you know, more and more was happening as we went along.
I don't care what you want. I want you gone.
I started to provoke them. I would just say horrible things to them, like, you know, "You're dead. You don't belong here. Your life's over. Get out of my apartment. I'm gonna call somebody in here. We're gonna get you. You're gonna go." I threatened to get a priest in there. I threatened to bless the place and all these things. And every time I did that, the lamp would get real bright. I mean, almost where you're waiting for the bulb to blow up. I mean, that's how bright it would get. Then it would go back down dim again. And so I could tell I was starting to touch some nerves somewhere.
Michael was losing his patience, and the events were escalating.
This letter A that formed on the wall was in a ball of light, like a spotlight. And in the middle was a dark, shadowy A on there. It turns out the little girl that lived there, her name was Angela.
People who die suddenly and tragically often don't necessarily realize that they've passed on. Therefore, they're going to go back to the place that's most familiar to them.
I had goosebumps all over my body, and it scared the hell out of me. The last straw came almost 2 months in this apartment. I woke up one morning and I smelled something burning. That's what woke me up. And I noticed it was too bright. I looked and the blinds were gone off the window. I sat up and looked, and clear across the room, these blinds were laying on my electric heater, melting. And I was the only one home that day. These blinds were screwed into the wall, the wood frame of the window, and you would have to take off caps. You would have to take off 4 screws, and then you would have to lift them off to take them off. And I didn't hear any of that happening while I was sleeping. I started packing. I said, that's it. That was the end of it. I packed up that day. I packed up quick and left. I have no doubt in my mind it was connected, and I think I ticked them off enough where they were willing to bring me with them, because that's, obviously they were trying to burn the place down again. I mean, that's sort of, I mean, why else would you put plastic on a heater? After that, my friend Frank, who owned the building, he decided he would move in. He would take my apartment. He lasted there about a month. And then a month later, the building was up for sale. And I tried to talk to these guys. Why? He said they fixed it up. Why'd they sell it? They won't tell me. I think I know, though.